My colleagues are monitoring the chat, so if there's anything urgent, feel free to type it in there. My name is Solomon Delos Reyes, and the photos on the right are a cry for help. Please stay sheltered. It's the only way I can get back to my joys. The beach, sushi. I'm not talking about that door-bashed sushi they're passing off as sushi. I'm talking about sushi directly from the sushi chef's sushi. And of course, watching the greatest NBA basketball team in the league play live. Extravagant traveling, omakase, and attending live sporting events are all expensive habits I picked up from a misspent youth in management consulting. That's right, I wasn't always fighting the good fight. In 2008, when I graduated with an applied math and stats degree, no one was hiring actuaries, which at the time, aside from being a teacher, is what you did with a math degree. And as you may recall, 2008 wasn't the best year to be trying to find a job. Thankfully, I landed a job with Deloitte Consulting as a software tester, and in a short few months, I started to move into software development and management. And as much as I enjoyed my newfound role, I always had this desire to get back to math. Shortly thereafter, data analytics started to emerge, and for me, it was one of the best opportunities I could get, combining my math background with my new technical skills. From there, data and I spent the next few years becoming intimately familiar. I worked in a wide range of data roles, everything from traditional business analysis to the unglamorous ETL engineering to the cool and sexy big data and data scientists. It's data science. But without a doubt, the highest point of my career journey has been my past 4 years here at EducationSuperHighway. At ESH, I was given an opportunity to apply all of my learnings and skills to help reshape the American educational system. And it is my great pleasure to spend some time with you to highlight how data can be a force multiplier for mission-driven organizations. My first goal today is to make you all believers. If you walk away saying, "He had some good points," then I haven't done my job. I want you to walk away thinking, "I can't wait to get back to the office because the days of data just sitting on the couch are over." Second, I want to arm you with strategies, tips, and case studies so that when you get data working in your organization, it's working effectively and efficiently. To start off, let me give you some background on EducationSuperHighway. In 2012, the internet connection in most schools was slightly better than what people had in their homes. And at the same time, schools were starting to do more online. They were moving from just using internet for online testing to using internet for digital learning. It was clear that one of the biggest barriers to digital learning in the classroom was lack of internet. And so our founders established EducationSuperHighway and set out on a mission to upgrade the internet access in every public school in America so that every student could take advantage of digital learning. In addition to creating the mission, they also gave us a deadline of accomplishing this by 2020. I'm happy to say that as of today, 99.6% of all districts have enough internet to begin digital learning in the classroom. And if I were to summarize in one word how we were able to get from 30% of schools having enough internet in 2012 to 99.6% of districts having internet today, data. At ESH, data was core to everything we did. We went beyond just using data to report progress. We used data to be more effective at convincing stakeholders to take action. This excerpt from our annual report highlights that although most districts had sufficient bandwidth, if we stopped trying to upgrade schools, over 6 million students would be left behind. We also use data to focus our programmatic resources in the places that they were most likely to create impact. This image, taken from our Compare and Connect K-12 tool, shows which districts in Arizona don't have a fiber optic connection. At ESH, we found that helping a school district upgrade their internet connection to fiber is one of the most effective ways of ensuring the district would have enough bandwidth for digital learning now and in the future. We also use data to significantly scale our impact without drastically increasing resources. As we expanded our programs, the amount of analysis needed to support our programs increased as well. In order to feed the beast, we developed a suite of self-service dashboards that enabled our employees to tailor their conversations with policymakers, departments of education, and school districts. And now that I've gone over why you should make your data work for you, let's talk about how. And to demonstrate how you can get data to work for you, I will highlight the importance of developing a data strategy. I'll introduce ways that you can apply analytics easily and affordably. I'll show you how you can ensure programs are effective with data and highlight how we did this at ESH. And I'll discuss the importance of creating a data culture. Earlier, I gave 3 examples of how we made data work at ESH, and those are just a fraction of the ways we made data work. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of ways to make data work, but not all of those ways are the right ways for your organization. In order to determine the most effective ways to use data in your organization, start by developing your data strategy. A data strategy defines how data will accelerate the success of your mission. You may recognize some similarities with these points and the points from 3 slides ago. In that slide, I referenced these points to highlight what ESH did with data. Now I want to emphasize that an effective data strategy can help you identify how to accomplish these same points at your organization. So let's talk about how you can build a data strategy. Start by crafting the question where if you knew the answer, it would help you accelerate your progress. At EducationSuperHighway, our question was, what is internet like in every public school in America? The answer to this question would be key to convincing federal and state policymakers on solving the issue. An important note about this question is you have to make sure it's the right question. Had we asked, how many schools in America have internet access? We would have gotten the answer, 98% of schools have internet, because most of them had just enough internet for casual browsing and computer labs, but not enough for digital learning in the classroom. In order to answer this question, we conducted speed tests in schools across the country, and we found that 90% of students needed an upgrade, which was enough to convince policymakers to take action. But it doesn't stop with just one question. Demonstrating that 90% of students in America needed upgrades was great for getting policymakers to act and helping us understand who needed an upgrade, but it didn't give us the insights we needed to understand how to make these upgrades happen. For us to determine how to upgrade students, we needed answers to more questions. Our follow-up question then became, who's buying what, from whom, and at what price? What we found in answering this question was that the median price that school districts were paying for internet was a staggering $22 per meg, compared to businesses at the time that were paying $3 per meg. Our conclusion was that if districts could also pay $3 per meg, they could afford to purchase the amount of internet needed for digital learning. And getting schools to pay $3 per meg became our programmatic strategy. In summary, to build your data strategy, start with a question, ensure it's the right question, ask more questions, and use the answers to those questions to define your programmatic strategy. And this may seem like a very linear process, but we found that we were constantly going back to 3 and 4. With more data, we had more questions, and the answers to those questions continue to refine our programmatic strategy. Now, you may be wondering, if you don't know how to work with data, what good is a data strategy? And in this next section, I'll give you some practical ways on how you can work with data. So for now, let's start with the basics. In order to do anything with data, it's good to know what data you have. So start by inventorying. Most of us probably have data in spreadsheets, and that's great. If you don't have spreadsheets with data, PDFs and physical documents can be good sources of data as well. Once you've inventoried all of your data, compare it to your data strategy and identify what additional data sets you need for your data strategy. If you can't find the data you need online, don't give up. See if you can manually collect it or if there are similar data sets available. Now, I know I just said collect data manually, and the data analyst in me cringes at the thought of processing manually collected data. However, given the fact that you have to manually collect data, indicates to me that in your area of focus, there are probably a lot of opinions, maybe some good anecdotes, but little to no opinions grounded in solid evidence. With insights from your manually collected data, your voice will rise above the rest because you have data to support you. When we first started at ESH, there wasn't a data set to tell us how much bandwidth school districts had. We went out and contacted school districts to see if they'd be willing to share with us their E-rate application forms because it listed what they were purchasing. We also conducted school speed tests to gather data. It was from these cobbled together sets of data that we were able to demonstrate to policymakers that 90% of students needed an upgrade. The added benefit from our insights was that we were able to make the case to the FCC that making E-rate data publicly available was beneficial. When they did make it public, we were able to stop spending time trying to get the data and start spending time analyzing the data. Now, when it comes to tools used for analyzing data, I found that companies typically gravitate towards one end of the data tooling spectrum. There's the MacGyvers. They have one tool, typically Excel, and they use it for everything. It makes sense because Excel can be simple and it can also do anything that you can think of with data for a price. But like the Swiss Army knife, it does many things, but only a couple of things well. And then there is the early adopter method. The companies who use so many tools, either because every time they see a new tool that has a cool feature, they have to have it, or because every analyst on their team has their preferred tool, it can't be as efficient if they don't use them, or because the company has been around so long that they've never sunset legacy tools. When I came to ESH in 2016, we were definitely employing the early adopter method, and it was a challenge to manage all of those tools. Primarily, we struggled with consistency. 2 different analyses would go out in different formats, like an Excel spreadsheet and a Tableau report. The data in those reports would be just similar enough that someone would inevitably compare them and find differences between them. We would then spend countless hours lost in this rabbit hole of trying to figure out why there were differences. So my advice to all of you is aim to be left of center on the spectrum. Using only one tool can create inefficiencies because the one tool is not great at everything. Using too many tools creates its own management and reconciliation headaches. And I say left of center because you should think long and hard before adopting a new tool. Ask yourself if the tool justifies the headaches. Now for some practical advice. To the MacGyvers of the world, if you're using Excel spreadsheets as your golden source of truth, consider moving your data to a database. It'll save a significant amount of time managing your data. If you have recurring processes that require sending spreadsheets regularly, consider using a business intelligence tool. Someone in your organization is putting in work to place the data from the place data into the spreadsheet, format it, quality check it, and email it. There are plenty of free tools built to automate those tasks and reduce the human error factor. If you have data in Excel that requires a person to regularly update it, consider automation. It'll save them time, and again, it'll reduce the human error factor. And for those early adopters out there, catalog your tools, identify their strengths, and eliminate tools that have similar strengths. Strive to use those tools for what they're good for. And once you have a smaller set of tools, ensure every analyst is cross-trained to use them. At EducationSuperHighway, we decided to only use Excel when we needed to send lists of data. If we wanted to make charts or visualizations, we'd use Tableau. If we needed to do some advanced scripting, we would use Python. If we just needed to create some data sets for sending, we would use SQL to pull those data sets directly from the database. And then we spent time ensuring everyone knew how to use those tools. Now you're probably thinking, wow, data tools, that sounds great, but you kind of need people to know how to use those tools, and I don't have the budget to hire those types of people. Well, at EducationSuperHighway, we also had to be creative when it came to hiring analysts. In the Bay Area, analysts and data scientists don't come cheap. So we hired a veteran, who I refer to in this slide as the analytics coach, and then hired a team of eager and bright critical thinkers. For this model to work, it's absolutely critical to hire the right coach. They must have experience, they have to be patient, and they need to be an effective teacher. I love academics, but I don't love them for the role of coach. I use a veteran metaphor for the coach because they need to have been on the front lines. They also need to understand the difference between a skirmish and a full-on war. A predominantly junior team is going to have questions, they're going to get frustrated, they're going to be confused. The coach is their anchor, and a junior team will be hyper-focused on how a coach responds to adversity. And if the coach is frequently unhinged, the team will follow suit. In terms of who to hire on the team, hire individuals that are hungry, problem solvers, and have a basic understanding of data. And that's it. If they have no data analytics experience, they'll pick it up because they're hungry and they're problem solvers. A couple of years ago, we brought over a designer from our marketing team to our analytics team, and it was one of the best quote unquote hires we've made. What was interesting was in some ways she was a coach, and in some ways she was junior staff. She provided us great perspective on how to effectively communicate our insights, but initially she had very little understanding how to find insights from data. So we spent time coaching her on that. And today, our analyst team at ESH is full of exceptionally qualified data analysts. Those junior analysts that we hired blossomed into rock stars in their own right. Now, if you can only hire one resource, this model still works. Hire the coach and bring on volunteers. There is a mass of people that have gone through data science boot camps, taken online analytics courses, and are unable to find work because they don't have relevant experience. I've had many conversations with people in these circumstances, and they are willing to do data analytics work for free so that they can begin filling their resume with relevant experience. In my experience, one of the biggest perceived barriers to performing analytics is data quality. All too often I hear, we don't trust our data as a justification for why a company can't do analytics. The truth is, you don't have to clean everything to get value from your data. Here's a process I think works well when you don't know where to start. Start with a hypothesis. Ask yourself, if this data was accurate, what would I do with it? If you find you have multiple uses, great. Prioritize them and pick one. Second, identify in the data set what fields you need for it to be useful. Third, roll up your sleeves, pull 10% of the data from those fields and start cleaning. After you've cleaned it, analyze it, and if your hypothesis is correct and you're seeing some value, clean more. Keep cleaning until you can use your findings to convince stakeholders that they should invest in systematically cleaning the data. At EducationSuperHighway, the E-rate data we use for analysis is notoriously inaccurate. We estimated that after cleaning the data set in the first year, only 50% of the data could be trusted. But that was more than enough for us to make an impact. We didn't stop there, and over time we developed new methods for identifying quality issues and new ways of cleaning data. Last year, our data set was 98% clean. Finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't spend some time talking about data science. My words of advice are don't get caught up with chasing the shiny ball early on. There's a place for data science, and it's not at the beginning of your journey. Simple metrics and statistics are compelling. At ESH, our insight that 90% of students in America needed an upgrade was a game changer, and it was a pretty simple calculation. As our organization grew, our repository of metrics grew, and at that point, we invested in effective means for automating and sorting data. And once the infrastructure was in place, we were able to make use of better data tools and develop amazing data visualizations like Compare and Connect K-12 and our internal reporting systems. It was only at this point, after establishing the infrastructure and processes, that we began to implement machine learning models. And if you're curious, the models we developed were aimed at streamlining and automating our manual data cleaning process. If you feel like you have a need that requires data science now, here's a list of what it typically takes to stand up an effective data science project. Lots of data, data processing horsepower, and at least one data scientist, but it helps to have two. The nice thing about the data journey I've outlined is that it's designed in such a way that when you get to the top of the mountain, you already have what it takes to stand up an effective data science project. So now that I've gone over with you how you can perform analytics, I'd like to show you how you can make, I'd like to show you how data can make your programs more effective. All organizations have high-level goals. They're sometimes referred to as OKRs, objectives and key results, BAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals. Typically, these are measured and reported quarterly, and sometimes even yearly. As leaders, we understand the importance of tracking progress towards these goals well before we're at the top of the mountain. Data can be an effective way of creating milestones to track progress so that your programs are aligned with your high-level goals. Let me start off by saying that using data to drive impact in your programs and measure progress is tricky. It deserves a whole webinar in and of itself, and luckily for you, my colleague Bryn Murray, who's a director of program analytics, has an entire talk on how to do just that. So for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to go over the basics of using data to impact programs. And if you're interested in understanding some more of the finer points, I'd highly recommend watching the talk that she gave at the 2020 Tech Fest for Good. So to develop effective programmatic progress reports, spend time defining what your key performance indicators are. When you build your programmatic progress reports to track those KPIs, build them in such a way that it allows for the frequency of reporting. For example, if you want a daily report, make sure that getting the data to fuel the report daily is sustainable. Also strive to use visualizations in the reports to represent data. And it's imperative that you take measures to ensure accuracy in the reports. The smallest error in a report can cast doubt on the entire thing. This is what our ESH programmatic progress report looked like. As you can see along the bottom, there are 7 KPIs we identified, and they align with the stages that districts go through in our consulting program as they upgrade to fiber. So for example, our first stage, plan and research, is when account owners review all the data about the district and put together a detailed plan on how ESH can help them upgrade. We then reach out to districts that need support, have a discovery phone call to understand their needs, get commitment from the district that they want fiber, help them put out a fiber bid, ensure they get bids, and ensure they are moving forward with the upgrade. These KPIs are critical for understanding if we could hit our high-level goals. In January, our KPI dashboard paid off in spades. It alerted us of a risk that we were not on track to meet our goal of getting 150 districts to bid. From this, we pulled a significant number of our staff to support in a working group whose sole job was to help us meet our goal of getting 150 districts to bid. The working group got us back on track and were able to meet our numbers. And more importantly, we got some school districts to get fiber had we not had the KPI dashboard. And if a data strategy is the blueprint on how you can make your data work, then data culture is the foundation on which all data rests. Data culture starts with you, the leadership team. Coursera's Publishing, which has a lot of good content on delivering analytics and professional development, says this about leadership and data. Data-driven leaders recognize that an organization must invest in, provide incentive for, and evangelize data. Measured failed is almost as good as measured success, and better for the company than unmeasured success. So yes, cultivating a data culture falls on us as leaders, but it doesn't have to be difficult. A lot of times it's as easy as asking, what does the data say? Although data culture starts at the top, you should encourage everyone to take part. You don't have to be a data analyst to listen to a presentation and identify opportunities where data can be used to support, or identify places where a chart might be helpful or more helpful than a table. I'd also highly recommend that you take the Storytelling with Data course by Cole Nussbaum-Knaflack. The course helps people and organizations create graphs that make sense and weave them into compelling, action-inspiring stories. It was a game changer for our organization because after we took the course, we were all singing from the same hymn book. The request of the analytics team at ESH changed from, can I have some data for a presentation, to, can you help me find the most effective insights to convince my audience to act? So in conclusion, your data can be impactful. To do so, develop a data strategy. Start with applying your analytics easily and affordably. consider instrumenting your programs with data and cultivate a culture of data within your organization. So thank you for attending this webinar. I hope you found this informational and helpful. We have 2 more webinars over the next 2 Fridays. Next Friday, our CEO, Evan Marwell, will be presenting on fundraising for impact. And the Friday after next, Jack Lynch and Jenny Miller, our state relationship directors, will be presenting on partnering with governments effectively. So with that, I'd love to open up the floor and see if you have any questions.
Hi, Solomon. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We have a couple of questions. So first of all, the recording of this and the slide deck will be sent out in a follow-up email. So just check your inbox over the next day or 2. That will get to you. We also had another question for you, Solomon.
Sure.
Is it important to get a degree in data science? How useful are the online courses if one wants to pursue a career in data science?
Good question. Is it important to get a degree? It's very helpful. I think that what I've seen is that people who have come out of boot camps have probably just as much knowledge as people that are getting degrees. I think in actuality, when they're being measured against people that have degrees, the people with degrees have an advantage. But I also think that your experience outside of your degree with data science can be also a differentiator. So if you already have a kind of traditional data analytics background, a boot camp, getting kind of learning data science through the boot camp will probably be fine. But if you're kind of starting from scratch, a degree could be helpful. The other thing I'd note is before, typically data scientists had to have either a master's or a PhD, and you couldn't get a data scientist job with that. And nowadays, there are programs there to get a data science degree with a bachelor's. So it's not as intense, and they really focus on that.
Great, thank you so much. Another question is, what are some of the free tools that you've used in the past? If, for example, you don't have some of the more advanced, more expensive ones.
Sure thing. I would classify data tools, I kind of bucket them into 4 buckets. There's databases or data warehouses that store your data. MySQL was the first, and then Postgres came along. They're both open source databases, and they're phenomenal. At ESH, we actually use Postgres, and it's a great database. Another bucket is visualizations, exploratory reporting. There, it's a little tricky. The free ones are not so great. For example, Google has its own analytics dashboard called Data Studio. It's very buggy if you put in lots of data, however, it's free. We use Tableau, and Tableau is interesting because there's the Tableau desktop where you can just create your own visualizations, and then you can actually send out that dashboard, and you can download a Tableau reader, which is free. The desktop license costs about $70 a month. Now, if you're a nonprofit, you can actually, through TechSoup, get that license for $50 a year. And to me, that's like practically free. It's an amazing deal. And they give you up to 5 a year. So I would highly suggest that. ClickView is another good tool, which ClickView itself is free, but sharing their dashboard, you then have to pay to actually share their dashboard. So you can do your own analytics with ClickView, but if you want to share it to anyone, then you have to pay. So those are 2 good options with visualizations. Both Python and R, which are kind of helpful for the more advanced scripting, are free. They're open source. So those are awesome. They have like these extensive libraries. So those are really good to use, and kind of a good comparable tools to, say, SAS or SPSS, if you've heard of those, which are paid for. And finally, I think, there's always just that like classic spreadsheet where Excel, where you want to do stuff in. obviously, you have to pay a little bit for Excel. Google Sheets is free, and it has almost as much functionality for spreadsheets. So for the most part, anything you want to get in Excel, you can pretty much do in Google Sheets. Those would be the main ones I would suggest in terms of free tools.
Great, thank you. I do have another question, and this is related to our stats on students connected to internet. So we have a question clarification. You mentioned that now 99.6% of school districts have internet today, as opposed to 30% at the beginning. And then later on, we had mentioned 98% of districts early on had internet, though those connections were variable in terms of their speed. Can you clarify that?
Sure thing. So for us, what is at ESH, what has been the most important thing is for districts to have enough internet to ensure that every student has access to digital learning. And so that was our goal. That's where we're at 99.6%. Initially, that 98% of districts that had internet, it was only enough internet to do some browsing in the career center or like mainly for teachers, but not for students to bring in devices and do all kinds of digital learning. That requires so much more bandwidth. So that point was to highlight that, if in the nation at the time, the assumption was that every school had internet and like we were good. We didn't have to like get internet to these schools. And really, yes, they did have internet, but they didn't have enough for digital learning. And to get enough for digital learning was no easy thing of just saying, oh, let's get you some more internet. It took the work of one, making sure every school had fiber infrastructure so that they could get more bandwidth. Two, ensuring that the prices were cheap enough for them to be able to afford more bandwidth. So that's kind of the distinction between the 98% of districts having it at the time and now getting districts to 99.6% now. Great question.
Thank you. Another question, this one's about data security. So while data is important, how do you help protect the data that you acquire? And where does it go once your company shuts down?
That's a great question. So, and one that we haven't had to worry too much about at Education Superhighway, because for the most part, all of our data was public data. So we were taking a public data set, we were cleaning it, applying our analytics, and then, typically we would go out and publish high-level metrics. But in my previous roles, I do recognize the importance of securing your data and putting in the effective measures to make sure it's secure. And I think that every data analyst team needs to consider that. And there are a number of ways to secure your data, and I think it's important to invest in that and potentially invest with someone to help you figure out what are the best ways to secure your data. For us, when our company shuts down, we actually have some partners that are going to be taking the baton from us. So we set up every school and district to start digital learning in the classroom, but it doesn't stop there. We have to actually ensure that they're increasing the amount of bandwidth as the need for technology grows and as the digital learning applications start to use more bandwidth. So we actually have some partners that are going to be taking that on from us. So we're passing our data over to them. So yeah, so in summary, it is important to secure your data, and it's something that we didn't have to focus on so much, but it's definitely worth doing that. And every situation is unique, so I'm happy to kind of talk after this meeting and give you some ideas on potentially how best to do it in your situation.
Thank you. That is currently all of the questions that we have, but if anybody has additional questions, you can raise your hand or you can chat it in. happy to take any more. I will also point your attention to the handout in the handout section, which is an infographic Solomon and our team created about how we invested in our data budget. And it's a pretty succinct way of showing our data journey, and I encourage you to take a look at that. I also chatted out links to our colleague Bryn Murray's presentation from Good Tech Fest, and also the website, Storytelling with Data, which Solomon mentioned is an excellent source, and they have awesome newsletters that are free. So I recommend signing up for those as well. Oh, we did get more questions. Hold on, here we go. We have a question about the 0.4% of schools that did not upgrade and any characteristics around those school districts.
Sure. Yeah, let me give you an example of some of these districts. I believe there's a district in Oregon that basically said we don't necessarily agree with technology, and we don't want that anywhere near our kids. There are places in Alaska that are extremely remote, and it's so expensive to get internet built out there that it wasn't a cost-effective thing for them to. Well, it should be. Yeah, it didn't come across to them as cost-effective. So there are these just really small holdouts where they have these unique situations where it wasn't easy for them to get internet.
Yes, thank you. Another question. Do you think it's important to go after the data that big data groups do not go after? For example, if they say students have interned in these places, should we be looking at the places that do not have internet and show that to policymakers?
Do you think, sorry, it's a good question. To go after data that big data groups do not go after. I definitely think so. I think that, at Education Superhighway, for us, getting the first 80% of districts upgraded was the easy part, because it was easy to contact them. They had a lot of students, and that last 20 was the hardest. And because these were the remote schools, the ones that were really far out there, the ones that service providers weren't so keen on building fiber all the way out to, but it was important to make a difference with them. And I think that since we are not a profit-driven organization, it kind of falls to us to work towards getting, or it falls on us to create that type of equity and really stand up for those people that don't have a lot of options.
Awesome. Yeah, and just to clarify, so our question was about if students say they have internet in those places, should we be looking at the places they don't have internet and show them to policymakers? I think that's as opposed to investigating whether they truly do have internet in those places. I think that's what the question is about.
Oh, but they say, yes, I think there's definitely this sense of using data to show where the need is, as opposed to just taking things at face value, which is what we did with initially when I was talking about kind of the 98% of schools have internet, right? We actually, as we validated it, we said actually no, they may have internet, but they don't have enough internet for digital learning. So I think yes, it is important to go after that data. And unfortunately, the data doesn't exist sometimes, and so you kind of have to get a bit scrappy with how you get it, and then figure out ways how to automate the ingestion of that.
Thank you. One more question. Was your work around getting school districts connected And was it not around access to the internet at home, which is a big topic of conversation since so many schools are learning remotely?
Yes, I think, and our CEO tells us story a lot, but as when he started and we set out on this mission to upgrading schools, it was so like scope. He was challenged about the scope of the mission so many times, whether it was kind of should we then address the homework gap, which is getting internet to children at home, or should we think about all of these other things? And he was very clear of like we have to stay focused on this mission, or else we won't be able to get these schools upgraded by 2020. Specifically for that homework gap, so pre-COVID, we did a whole uh, work stream, or we conducted a whole round of analysis to see that after 2020, should we consider working on the homework gap? And one of the conclusions was, we don't know that we'd be successful because there wasn't a lot of motivation across the board to ensure that everyone at home could get internet. Now, COVID happened and that completely changed. And actually, starting once COVID started and the shelter in place started, everyone across the board saw that this was an issue and that we should work to ensure that everyone had internet at home. So we have actually, ESH has actually started doing analysis and coming up with recommendations on how best to get households internet and how districts can work with them. Natalia, if you have a chance, can you Slack out kind of our link to Digital Bridge? That may give you some insights as to what we've been doing there too.
Absolutely. I just sent that in a chat, and please take a look. It's digitalbridgek12.org.
These are great questions. Thanks, everyone. I was afraid there'd be none.
Oh, great. And our attendees have already found that. So thank you. I'm so glad that you took a look at that and that I hope it was useful. I think that was the last question. If anybody has anything else, please feel free to chat it in. Otherwise, I encourage you to look at the handout. We will send the slides. Please sign up for the next 2 webinars if you're interested. The sign-up links will also be in the follow-up email, and share it with your colleagues. Our goal is just to make this useful and spread the knowledge for other nonprofits, and we'd love to have anyone that would like to join.
Thanks, everyone. If you come up with any questions later around data or in the future, feel free to email me at solomon@educationsuperhighway.org. Happy to talk in more detail about anything with you. Thanks for attending and have a great Friday.
Thank you.